Massena, New York, 1959. The post-war industrial boom is roaring across America. The St. Lawrence Seaway has just been completed, allowing great cargo ships to travel smoothly between the Atlantic Ocean and the Great Lakes. The world has never been smaller or more accessible. Low-cost, reliable electricity is flowing from the new St. Lawrence Franklin D. Roosevelt Power Project, a massive dam that straddles the river and harnesses its unending hydropower. The Pittsburgh Reduction Company, later to become the Aluminum Company of America, we know it better as Alcoa, is the first major manufacturer to tap into the enormous supply of power that originates just upstream, building a large manufacturing complex on the southern bank of the St. Lawrence. Reynolds Metals soon followed, and then the world's most valuable company came to town. General Motors is atop the Fortune 500, a place it holds continuously until 1974. Massena, with its low-cost electricity and established aluminum producers, is the ideal place to make the pistons, cylinder heads, and other powertrain components for the vehicles other GM workers are assembling in its vast network of factories throughout the US and Canada. The company builds a factory and supporting operations on 217 acres along the St. Lawrence River in Massena, just east of the thriving aluminum plants. For decades, thousands of head-of-household manufacturing jobs sustained generations of families in and around Massena, through good economic times and bad. At its peak, as many as 1,600 people worked for GM in Massena. This engine of economic prosperity multiplies its benefits throughout the community. However, along with this prosperity comes a tragic byproduct of industrialization then common throughout America: the release of pollutants to the surrounding environment. These manufacturing practices may have been acceptable at the time, but we now know they were not sustainable. A growing awareness of this across America in the late 1960s and early 70s results in the enactment by Congress of a series of sweeping and comprehensive new environmental laws to protect and clean up the air, water, and land, but only well after these practices began in Massena. Nearly 500 still worked at the plant in 2007, when GM shocked the community by announcing it would wind down operations and close it by the end of the following year, cutting off this source of prosperity that had sustained families in the area for nearly half a century. Then GM, once the world's most valuable company, filed for bankruptcy in 2009 and abandoned the Massena plant, shedding all responsibility for the environmental contamination left behind. The jobs were gone, and the community was left with an idled, abandoned, and contaminated industrial property. Fortunately, a vision of the Mayor's Automotive Coalition, White House Auto Task Force, U.S. Department of Labor, U.S. Department of Treasury, U.S. Department of Justice, U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, St. Regis Mohawk Tribe, State of New York, and the other states where GM had abandoned properties came together during the financial crisis and deep recession of 2009 and 2010. This vision came to fruition in 2010 with the settlement agreement, and in 2011 when the U.S. Bankruptcy Court for the Southern District of New York created and empowered a trust, the Revitalizing Auto Communities Environmental Response Trust, better known as RACER, to do something about the GM job losses and legacy environmental contamination. RACER Trust did not put the contamination there, but as the new, responsible steward of the land, was charged with the dual mission of conducting a safe and protective cleanup and restoring the property's value as a producer of jobs and tax revenues for the community. The environmental challenges at the Massena property were considerable and costly. The property already was a Superfund site and on the U.S. EPA's National Priorities List, a catalog of the most contaminated sites in the United States. The main contaminants were PCBs, a component of the hydraulic fluids GM used in metals casting before the U.S. EPA banned PCBs in the 1970s. The U.S. EPA ordered a site cleanup that was determined to be protective of human health and the environment and accepted by the St. Regis Mohawk Tribe and New York State. Though the cleanup had begun before RACER Trust was created, RACER is responsible to complete the work under EPA's direction with additional oversight from the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation and the St. Regis Mohawk Tribe. From the beginning, Racer Trust and its team of contractors drew from local companies and the local labor force to provide jobs for its cleanup operations. Between 2011 and late 2018, they safely removed and disposed of more than 500,000 tons of contaminated wastes, including the manufacturing building itself. By December 2018, the majority of the active remediation of the property was completed and site restoration activities were progressing. Throughout 2019 and 2020, site restoration activities will be completed and Racer Trust will work with the U.S. EPA to undertake the eventual removal of the property from the national priorities list. The property is now ready for redevelopment and reuse once more as an economic engine for the community. Racer Trust is collaborating with the Town of Massena, North Country Redevelopment Task Force, St. Regis Mohawk Tribe, State of New York, and others to expose the opportunities for investment at the property to the North American market by touting its availability of abundant, low-cost, reliable, renewable energy, access to the international border crossing point, active rail service, and experienced local workforce. 60 years ago, General Motors looked at this property and imagined what it could be. Today, others once again are doing the same, made possible by the vision and collaboration of many and the successful implementation of the Racer Trust missions. A clean slate, a fresh start. Imagine the possibilities.